you stand for the salute to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. The first order of business for this evening would be a motion for approval of the chairperson. Be it resolved that upon the recommendation of the superintendent of schools, the Board of Education for the Trumansburg Central School District hereby approves Gary Astles as the chairperson of the budget hearing on May 1st, 2018, and the annual meeting on May 15th, 2018. Second? Discussion? Questions? Those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? I'll abstain. Okay. May I have a motion for the approval of election inspectors? Be it resolved that upon the recommendation of the superintendent of schools, the Board of Education for the Trumansburg Central School District hereby approves the following as election inspectors for the annual meeting on May 15th as presented. And those people are listed below.
Second.
Questions? Hearing none. Those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstention? Motion carries. We'll adjourn to the annual budget meeting. So, now, as the chairperson officially, I can gavel that meeting to order. All right. Declare public hearing for the purpose of introducing our Board of Education candidates for the terms that come due on July 1st, 2018. And they are Patrick Masters, Scott Sherwood, and Michael Hunter. And if any or all of those candidates would like to speak, we'll start with Pat Masters. And names were drawn, I believe, by a hat, so this is totally random.
Me.
Wherever you'd like.
Thank you very much. I am, as Mr. Astles said, Patrick Masters. I am running for the school board again. This is my second attempt. I appreciate the opportunity to come back and try and serve the school again. I don't have any campaign platform that I chose to put out tonight other than my willingness to work with the current board and the future board, no matter who ends up on it, to make and continue to do the work that the school board's already doing. So I don't really have any. Does anybody have any questions? Or?
In the past, the board has not asked questions of the candidates, but if the audience would like to.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Appreciate the opportunity.
Next, Mr. Sherwood.
Good evening, my name is Scott Sherwood, 1989 graduate of Charles O. Dickerson High School. Married to that lovely lady back there, Tina Sherwood, with a blended family of 6 kids, 2 of which have graduated from here. We have I'm sure I get this right, a senior graduating this year, a sophomore, 8th grader, and a 4th grader still currently. So we certainly know the struggles that folks deal with day to day, family, work, school, athletics, etc. I am an owner at Spruce Row Campground. I've been there since 1999, became an owner in 2010. Also currently employed as a substitute bus driver here in the district, of which I am aware, should I be elected, I'll have to resign that position. During my time employed at the school, I was the support staff representative from the transportation department. I also sat on the negotiations team for the current contract when it started several years ago, the negotiations. So I've got a pretty good insight on how things work from the standpoint of negotiations with the staff, support staff, and district team. I also, in my profession, was a member of the Campground Owners of New York, in which I sit on the board of that. I'm a first vice chair on the board of directors, so I have a pretty good familiarity on protocol and other tools of order and all that good stuff that come with being on a board. 16-year member of the New York Army National Guard, several deployments with Operation Noble Eagle in the early 2000s. And in my spare time, I volunteer coach for the Trumansburg Youth Football Program, the Ithaca Cal Ripken Baseball, which my son just started a game currently, so I probably will be excusing myself when we're finished as I help coach that team. And then also the Trumansburg Travel Baseball in the summer, I assist with that as well. So my reasons for running, I'm deeply rooted here in Trumansburg. I graduated from here, and I feel like input of lifelong residents is very important on the school board. You know, we enjoy this town for what it is and the luster of it, and I feel like lifelong residents have a lot of value and input when it comes to those things. While I appreciate the district's diligence with the budget, as a taxpayer with a fairly stout tax bill, I am happy that each year they work very hard to maintain that budget, and we don't see a lot of increases. However, there are some things I'm interested in learning about, maybe different allocations of money and so forth, where it's spent and reasons why. To me, extracurricular activities are very important, and by the way, I know Mr. Hunter's involved with the robotics club, and they just had a fantastic run, so congratulations to them, but just a good example of absolutely. Well, I understand that's not a school program, it's still Trumansburg kids doing it, and it's a very valuable extracurricular thing. Athletics as an extracurricular is very important to me. And that's something that, should I be elected, I want to get very involved with. I feel like we owe it to the kids to provide the best coaches and the best programs that we can. You know, for any of you that have been around a while, and I use this story a lot, and Pat will agree with me, there used to be a coach by the name of Jack Reed here in this school. And I will tell you, there's kids that I graduated with that will tell you, if not for him, they would have never graduated. So those are the kinds of coaches that I feel like we should, you know, as best possible, provide for kids in this district, in all programs. My other biggest concern, educationally, we have outstanding opportunities for what I call, you know, academic accelerators. There's college courses, there's AP courses, there's all that kind of stuff. I'm not ashamed to stand up here and tell you that our kids are not that. We have 5 boys in the house, and they're like the middle-of-the-road students that academics is really not high on their list of priorities. I feel like there needs to be more, maybe more emphasis put on educating them, not necessarily maybe sending them to BOCES, because it's kind of a half a day that's easier, maybe more academic. We learned through our student that's a senior this year, he did 1 year at BOCES and realized that's not going to really do anything for him when he graduates. And, you know, Tina's a teacher, and she's had the foresight to work on the academic side of it, and now he's back in school for his senior year preparing for college. My 2 kids that graduated both did BOCES, and I will tell you, and it's no fault of BOCES, it's no fault of this school, they were not prepared for life after high school. So that is a big concern to me. Those middle-of-the-road kids that, you know, maybe need a little push to think a little harder. I don't know what the answer is, but that's a concern. I guess in closing, I just want to say thanks for the support that I've received so far. I'm happy to answer any questions or talk to anybody after this. I just want to do my part in serving the community through this board. So thank you all very much.
Oh, I'm sorry. Did we have a question?
Yeah.
Yes, oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah. Question, I mean, I was on the negotiation team with you for support staff, so you had that, you know, side of it there. So let's say if you were elected to the board, so when you were on that side of it for, you know, a negotiations committee, how would you feel on that part of it? You'd be on the other side of it? Would you feel like that would be a conflict of interest at all, or would you still look at it?
I will tell you quite honestly, and I missed it in my notes, but I'm an advocate for the employees. I know, and this is a difficult situation, as you know, but you know, there's employees that maybe a little bit of a change has a whole lot of effect on, and personally, I would be an advocate for the employees. That's my stance.
Hey guys, can you expand a little bit more on your concerns about the BOCES program? Because my experience is that we've had students find great success going up there. I have read a few things that said about BOCES and then what you said today. I'm just a little conflicted because I know our students have found great success up at the BOCES program and opportunities that there is. With the size of our school and the budget we're operating under, there's absolutely no way we could offer what BOCES offers to our students here on campus.
Right. So my comments are based on our personal experience. And I know, again, that's, as I said, it's not the fault of BOCES, it's not the fault of the school. The child has to take responsibility, I understand that. But for example, and I'll use my son Hunter as an example. He was in the heavy equipment program. There was absolutely nothing heavy equipment about that program. They learned absolutely nothing to do with heavy equipment operation, with any kind of excavating, with any kind of thing that you would expect from a heavy equipment program, because BOCES didn't have the resources. They had a backhoe for a couple of weeks one year, but they're not allowed to dig because they can't dig on the property up there. So that was one bad example that we saw of a program that did not prepare him for life after BOCES.
So how would you propose then that the school, because clearly the school wouldn't have the budget for something like that.
Right.
So how could we offer better programs to our students that you're saying fall into that category if BOCES isn't the answer?
I'm saying, in the case of our senior this year, we took him out of BOCES and came up with a better academic schedule that will better prepare him after school.
Okay, so we do have the plan in place here on campus.
Right, absolutely.
Okay.
Right, and that's kind of where I'm going with that is, I personally feel like, and again, I'm not ashamed to tell you that a lot of kids will choose BOCES because they feel like it's maybe an easier route. And, well, I've seen it, I've lived it, and it's not, the academics is not their thing, and I understand academics is not everybody's thing. And there is need for trade school out there. I just can tell you from our experience that some of their programs aren't, like they're not going to leave there with a job. Now, while there are some that they will, I have seen some of the programs that I'm not crazy about this year.
I'm going to have to respectfully disagree with you on that, working in the schools and seeing our students that go there and some of the success they are finding. We have students going to nursing school who are in the nursing program. We have students that have been accepted to colleges for vet tech programs. So I would just advise that that's something that you look into more if you become part of the board to understand a little bit more of BOCES. Maybe it wasn't the right program for your children.
Well, and that's kind of where I'm going with this is my comments are based on our personal experience and the programs that we have seen. I do know that the nursing is a very good program. I do know that cosmetology is a very intense program. My daughter went through it. The vet tech school, I understand all of that, but I'm saying the more trade-oriented ones, like they did away with the construction program. Why is there no more construction program? Because we had 2 kids that would have loved to go through the construction program, the actual carpentry part of it, but that's gone, and there's a need for carpenters out there. So those are kind of more what I'm getting at there.
Well, there's times I think they've seen that there's reasons why and that, we don't technically, I think people kind of took the offense in saying that we don't ship students off to BOCES. A lot of times it's chosen, and that from like my personal experience with my child, it was the best thing that could have happened as far as the things he's done over the future. For computer technology, he went off to college, and there were many classes he was able to skip due to what he had taken through the computer program there. He's now going to get his pilot license, and he's way ahead of the class due to it. He's going to be 31 this summer. So the things I've seen, I was in middle school for a number of years in the special ed class for 5th through 6th grade or 8th grade with a student that was special ed his entire experience over there. And now I've seen him, I could tell you the name later, he's 23, 24 and did welding, and I would tell you the name and you would be very surprised. He took welding in BOCES for 2 years and is in the union making a ton of money right now. And Gary, you will be so pleased when I tell you the name later, that the experience for these kids at BOCES is phenomenal, the programs they have. So we don't just ship them off, and that's...
Duly noted.
Yes.
It's one person's opinion based on my experience.
Yeah, it's just, there's several. But yeah, the BOCES program is expensive. So, yeah.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Mr. Hunter?
My name is Michael Hunter. I am not from Trumansburg. I'm actually from Syracuse. I'm also going through a cold, so don't think I'm sounding all this. But so we moved down here due to my wife. She went to Cornell, and we didn't know where we wanted to go, except we didn't necessarily think Ithaca was the right place. We didn't really want to be city, but we wanted to be rural. So we did our research and said, man, Trumansburg looks like a really great place, and it's a nice local. They had good reputation, so we said, oh, that's great, we're going to settle here. So through that time, Terry became a chemistry teacher, and I became an electrician at Borg Warner, and then from there, developed a family and started getting really into their aspects of growing up. I did baseball for Ian and then Lucas, and we sort of kept going through, and then they did their things. They did karate and they did all that, and it was great that it was in the local environment. And then, you know, they just keep exploring and learning, and I really didn't think anything about going for the Board of Education at all, except for when I got to this program for FIRST and robotics. I was amazed at the level of, how would we say, I would not expect any student to perform at CAD work, fabrication, software enhancement, manipulation, stress, you name it. There wasn't one thing that I don't think that they could do that, I don't know if you would necessarily get it in the school's classroom environment, but that's not really what the school's classroom environment is for, right? It's the learning, it's the core, it's the foundation, and then you hopefully do that later on. But this is happening at the high school level, sometimes at 9th grade up, and you see these kids come in, and they are clueless about screw guns and screwdrivers and wire, and next thing you know, end of season, they're all making something, they're all very confident, they're reliable on information, they're networking with the kids, all around. I'm not just for robotics, but it was very impressive to see it. And so from that, I think there's an opportunity that the school is sort of missing right now in trying to incorporate that real world experience and going backwards, right, and putting it through into the classrooms. So our math and our science, our tech, all could have some aspects, not a lot, but some aspects to say, hey, look what's out there, and it's real world, and it's right here in our back door, and we can incorporate that with us, and here's this real world experience that we can take to class, and then go back out same day, and then go ahead and experience that. So we really liked that, and that actually is what initiated me to do this. So some of these things, the STEM process, I think it really should be enhanced if we can. There's a movement now for trying to go from STEM to STEAM, so they're trying to bring art into it. So it's an art and design idea, which helps those kids that it sort of looks like that's the thing that maybe is not necessarily as important. But if you think about any kind of architecture, design, those things all come from those creative minds, right? And should be just as important as the science, tech, the engineering, the mechanics. So all that should be part of that. So from that aspect, and the amount that these kids do, and that we're in this little community and we're enhanced to a level that we just went through in Detroit, and what they experienced for being such a small team, and they competed with teams that have large schools, large money, and they were able to compete really, really well. And so from that, I just felt that, you know what, this would be a great opportunity for me, if I could be on the board, that maybe I can create some guidance for our curriculum, our choice for superintendent, that particular way of thinking, hopefully gets ciphered down into all the different grade levels, right from elementary up, and that we can develop these great programs for not just robotics, but for music, for art, besides the sports. Sports we do really well at, so I don't know if we need to do enhancements on that, but if we can equalize that with the other aspects, I think that'd be great. That's about it.
Thank you.
Any questions? Thank you.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. And now, final overview of the 2018-19 school budget. And ask Lauren to do that presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. I might try turning the lights a little and see if the screen's easier to see, or is that okay? Is that better?
Yes.
Actually got it on the right mode this time, so I can. All right, this is the final overview for the budget for 2018-19, and certainly if anyone has any questions as I go through it, I'll address them as we go through. We have two resolutions going to the board, three actually. One is for the total fund. General fund appropriations will be $26,664,946, and that's the same number we've been discussing. What's it doing? Howard. Uh-oh.
It's good. It's good.
Okay. I hope it doesn't pop. Well, I guess if it does, we have lots of handout tape. Then we have a proposition for 3 full-size buses, which $300,000 now will come out of the reserve this year, and $30,000 is tentatively coming out of the capital allocations. The general fund, $30,000 out of general fund, $300,000 out of the reserves. The library budget is being proposed to go up by $3,566, and then of course we collect it and turn it back to the library. You can see over the last few years we had a budget increase in 15-16 of 4.6%, then a decrease 4.6%, another decrease, and this year's increase is 7.5%. What I do want to point out is that without the transfer to capital, because we have debt service coming in and going out for the capital project, without that transfer in and out of the general fund, the actual budget would only be going up 5.5%. We had $100,000. You can see the $100,000 carryover from last year. 18-19, we had tax-based growth factor. That's the amount of new property assessments in our school district all across the area. The allowable growth factor was 2%. It's limited to 2%. That's where when they say tax cap, it's the growth factor that's limited to 2%. There are other additions and subtractions. And because we're using the carryover from last year, our actual levy increase still staying within the adjusted, or still staying within the tax cap is 3.7%. So because we have more growth and because we have a carryover, we're allowed to go up to 3.7%, and we're still within the tax cap. That's good. And that generates $402,173. If we had to go, if this budget were not accepted or not voted in, we would end up losing. We would end up losing that $402,173, and we would have to go to a flat tax if it's not voted in. Am I going too fast? Okay. Without STAR, there's a $70 increase in the tax bill at the tax levy of 3.7% on a $100,000 house. And this estimate of $19.67 is an estimate because the rates change based on the assessments that won't be out until the summer. So this is just taking a tax rate times the estimated increase. This is not necessarily where the taxes will end up being because that really depends on the assessed value of the properties. If you have a home with start, it's only a $49 increase going into next year.
Lauren, could you make that,
Sure.
where'd the number 49 come from?
Oh, the difference between 1328 and 1377.
Okay.
And that's, and I'm sorry, that's $49 increase per 100,000.
Per 100,000, or for the first 100,000, because it's not per 100, because the next 100 doesn't get the star benefit. It's only the first 30,000, the basic star,
Right.
that you get.
Okay.
But 100,000 is a generic number that's pretty universal, used universally too, and that's full value assessment. Our proposed revenues, as stated, we have a $402,000 increase in the tax levy. State aid came in with an additional $430,579. And that's a combination of reimbursable aids and our foundation aid. There are different kinds of aids, but as a group, we were able to garner $430,000. This $475,000 from the debt services is transfer in. It's actually $500,000 will be coming in, and $500,000 will be going out on the transfers to the capital project. The biggest increases are in the appropriated fund balance and in the appropriated reserves. And we're going to get into more detail as why this year is such a very high year. And that gap is being closed by using some of our reserves and by using some more fund balance at this point in time. This is a list of all the fund balance currently in reserves. As you can see, we have unemployment, we have retirement contribution, capital reserve, capital for transportation, which we're using for the buses, reserve for repairs, which we're not going to use, and then we have our fund balances. I guess what I would like you to take note of is the $329,000 we're going to use out of the retirement contribution reserve. That's the biggest percentage increase of using those reserves that we've been setting aside. So that in combination with $10,000 out of unemployment, we're using those two reserve sources. We are going to be moving $500,000 into the capital reserve for the construction. We're going to be using $300,000 out of the reserve for the buses. And then our assignment of reserve of our unassigned fund balance will be going into balance the budget to the tune of $460,849. I think the estimate right now that we're going to recover the assigned fund balance from this year, we projected when this budget was put together that we would recover what we're appropriating this year out of fund balance. We're going to recover that through additional revenues. That's looking a little more positive. So we should be garnering even more than what we initially thought even a month ago in terms of revenues to be able to replenish that fund balance.
Lauren, could you walk me across the line of the assigned appropriated fund balance?
Sure.
I'm not sure I understand how it's going from balance of June 2017 to what the estimated balance is going to be in June of 2019.
This is what was applied to this year's budget. This is what we're looking to recover this year. And then 18-19, we're just assuming that that fund balance is being applied at this point in time. And so that fund balance, hopefully in next year's budget, we'll be able to recover that as well. May or may not. Generally speaking, what you do is you apply a fund balance and that's your margin, your cushion. So hopefully by the end of next year, we'll still have that back and be able to generate that in next year's budget. And we'll show you a couple different ways that we're going to be able, hopefully be able to do it. And now if things fall apart and we get unexpected expenses, that may not be the case. This is just a current projection.
And the unassigned fund balance is the somewhat untouchable 4% that we're supposed to have?
Yes, we're very close on the $1 million, is just a hair over the 4%.
So at the end of next year, we're going to be under the 4%?
We're going to be under the 4%. If all those things come through. Now, hopefully, this year, this 300 it's looking like it might be closer to 4. So if we're able to get that up through some of the reimbursements, then we'll be able to get closer to that $1 million mark and stay closer to the 4%. This is a description of the 3 basic component budgets, the administrative components, the program component, and capital. The administrative component is basically the central office expenses, some of our insurances and central costs that aren't specifically in the classroom or in the bus garage. So we carry the insurance costs, we carry the printing, and we carry the administration for the school buildings. The program component is pretty much anything in the classroom, including special education, occupational education, summer school, adult ed, and everything that's not in administration and not in capital. Basically everything in the classroom is under program or directly touching curriculum. The capital component includes everything that we pay for debt service, our leases, operations and maintenance, custodians, service contracts, utilities, and bus purchases. This is just a breakdown in terms of percentage, what those 3 percentages are of the total budget. This historical spending is a good indicator of where we've been going. The administrative budget over the last few years has been relatively stable and just increases in salaries, not huge changes. Capital budget, as you can see, has gone down the last 2 years, and that of course depends on the capital projects that we have going. We try and put $100,000 away for cash capital projects. We've cut that back to $35,000 this year. So that's one of the decreases. We also had projects that were going on before that we know, like the playground construction, that we're not doing next year. So some of those are just taking out one is, and we have a big capital project coming in. So even though we may not be spending it out of the general fund, we're going to be investing almost $25 million in a capital project shortly. So that's going to help us out quite a bit from the capital expenditure. And you can see that the program costs are our biggest increases over the last 3 years, the most significant. And we're going to get into why. Okay. The administrative components, these slides just list all the different departments that are included in the administrative component, and the increases are not that great, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time unless you have a specific question. Is that okay? Okay. As we go through, again, there's not much significant. Supervision regular school is the biggest increase, and that's mainly because of recoding some of the positions from where they were allocated previously. The reallocations are not necessarily new positions. And the supervision categories also now include the dean of students and special education. So those have been restated and are equitably shown across the last couple of years. So our administrative budget is up $176,000. But again, mostly due to raises and recategorization of some positions. Our program component, which has the largest increases, we're going to spend some time looking at the program for students with disabilities, because the largest increase from last year's budget to this year's budget is really a 2-year catch-up, which we're going to get into in more detail, and that's $1 million. And we're going to get into more detail as to why that's happening and how we're doing it. The other program components such as the
Lauren,
library.
excuse me,
Oh,
can you just go
sorry.
back for 1 second?
Sure.
The $76,956 in in-service training and instruction, what,
Yes, that is a position that's additional salary offset by some BOCES costs for the curriculum, director of curriculum. That is a new position. Well, it's a new position for the district offset by what was a BOCES service before. So it looks like a big jump. It's not really that much of a jump because we've been paying for it through BOCES and getting aid. But the aid shows in a different category, so it's not dollar for dollar increase.
and the occupational education is simply because of the 3-year average of students that we're sending?
Yes,
Okay.
yes, that is correct. Teaching special schools, I'll probably make another note there that we decided not to move forward with the summer school program at this point in time because with the stresses that we're going to be facing, we're not sure that that's sustainable over a long period of time. We just started the program, beefed it up this year, so we're going to let that go, and then as things are decided going forward, we may or may not end up that.
But Angie was just making the point that it was also no longer an option to be a shared service through BOCES. We were the only participating school that had interest for summer starting July 1. So that also changed the cost significantly for us. So moving forward, it may not have been an option, period.
Now I'm real. Yeah, thank you for slowing me down. If I'm going too fast, just yank me back.
No idea who you were.
Was that, I'm sorry, I didn't hear that. What did you say?
No, Angie got her card. We just had no idea who she was until she got her placard, so.
Oh! She was probably trying to stay, you know.
Can you go back to the administrative one and see
Sure.
if I think you just explained it with the program. Can you go back one slide?
This one?
Yeah. So the difference in curriculum development and supervision, 17-18 projected 102,031, and then 18-19 we're down about 90,000.
Yes, that's where the
So is
most-
that where the next line you said it was recategorized into the?
No, not necessarily. There actually, this curriculum and development picks up some of the BOCES piece that pays for the curriculum director, that it's on another line.
In the next screen.
Yes,
That's-
this is
that's-
90,000, some, I think 28,000 or 30,000 approximately as just standard increases for the administrators in those categories, and a couple of the clerical positions that were classified in other places.
And also the dean of students and director of special
And also the
education.
dean of, yes, the deans of students
Reclassified.
and the director of special education are now included in those lines.
Okay, thanks.
Anything else? And we're going to talk about programs for students with disabilities. Other program components, they get the school library, we're not taking anything away from the library. That's again a recoding of a partial position of a teacher that was coded in the library that was moved to the classroom. Health services, you'll see a big decrease. That was for a nurse that was initially budgeted for and hired for the current year, and that need is no longer there, so we no longer need that position.
There's actually a special education allocation for nursing services that did not come to fruition, so we did not actually hire.
Oh, you didn't hire that. I'm sorry, I thought you hired that. I'm going to click. District transportation services, no, we're not getting rid of any buses, and we're not getting rid of drivers. Again, it's a recategorization between the garage building and district transportation. You'll see that's a big chunk of the money that shows under garage building because the mechanics were previously under the transportation line. I moved them out and put them under the garage lines. So between that and then, of course, the changes, the increase in monitors, the increases in salary wages, overall between the two lines, there is an increase. But not as significant when you take both of them together. Okay. The next largest piece here, 66,000, not relative to benefits, is a transfer to other funds, and that's because we're treating some of the expenses that we're supporting the food service instead of having them covered through the benefit lines. We need to be a little more transparent and have the cafeteria support them, show all the benefits 100% over in their lines. And so this is just really a recategorization of where those expenses are falling. So they're going to be still paying the same benefits. It's just that now we're going to be transferring the money through a transfer line as opposed to just paying it out of the benefit line. So that's not new money. That's just shifted. And then benefits overall, you know, you have a $20 million budget. We'll talk about some of the increases in benefits, but that's only $400,000. Capital component of the operational plan, the largest piece there is the decrease in projects, as mentioned previously. We're cutting back $65,000 in the cash capital project, and we're cutting back some of the projects that were scheduled this year and completed that we won't have going forward. Bus purchases, this current year we paid for the majority of them out of the general fund and some of them out of the reserves. Next year, we're planning on paying for most of them out of the reserves and a small piece out of general. And 2 years from now, we're going to end up most likely bonding for them over 5 years. But the state aid comes in over 5 years, so the payments out and the payments in should be matched up pretty well for the next few years going forward. Debt service is down. It's just our scheduled debt payments. And transfer to capital fund, as you can see, is up 500, or the proposed amount, $535,000. 500 of it is that money that's coming in and going over to capital projects, and 35 is the cash capital piece that we're going to use to continue for the security cameras and other services, other security pieces, software, whatever we need in the district. And then, of course, benefits. So those are this is a summary of those three components and where the increases are. As you can see, $1,790,000 is the biggest overall increase in terms of program. In terms of the total budget going forward, out of $1,856,000. Any questions? I keep clicking. As far as the total increases in the budget this year, salaries and wages amount, this is a percentage of the increase, not a percentage of the total budget, a percentage of the increase in the budget. Salaries and wages amounted to 38%. Special education, non-salary items amount to 39% of the budget increases. New York State retirement is 9% of the total budget increase, and medical insurance, medical and health insurance, including dental, is 12% of the increase in overall budget, not a percentage of the total budget. And ERS represents 1% of the increase in the budget, not 1% of the budget. We look at employee benefits because they do generally amount to a significant increase over the last few years, mainly because of the fluctuation in TRS and ERS rates, which had gone sky high, then they leveled off. TRS is on the upswing again, ERS is relatively flat. But the teacher's retirement is up $171,000 because of A, rates, B, salary basis. State retirement is up, basically, the estimate is up because the salary bases are up even though the rates are fairly stagnant. So that's not as significant as it has been previously. It is, however, estimated to be $329,000, and that's the number that we're going to use out of the reserves to help cover that $329,000 cost right there, out of the reserves. Hospital, medical, and dental insurance, we talked about before. Hospital insurance premiums, 7% inflation rate right now. Overall, our benefits are up almost $500,000. We decided to spend a little more time on special education because it has become such a significant impact on this year's budget. And this is an example, well, this is kind of a diagram of where, can I get this to work? No, it won't. Yeah, there it goes. If you look here at the bottom left-hand corner, we generally budget more than what we expect to spend on special education. And that's standard. Everybody does it. We have such fluctuations with costs and changes in program, changes in services. Well, we also expected to have somewhat of an increase in special education going into this year, but nothing near what we actually ended up with in terms of expenses that we actually incurred. And we're going to spend some time, and Angela will explain that in a minute. So what you see when we're going forward into this upcoming year is we want to have our budget a little bit higher than what we think our actual expenses will be, because you still want to have some margin in there. You don't want to be going out there to the dollar because it's totally unpredictable. And what happened is we had such an increase in special education costs this year that we're actually making up almost 2 years worth of pretty significant increases. It's an anomaly, and so far we don't know that that's going to continue, but it took us by surprise. Let's put it that way. So that $1 million increase, we're going to look at.
Question.
Yes. Oh, sure.
So I was just wondering, I don't know if it's possible or not, but 2 slides back when you were talking about the insurance,
Sure.
is there a way that we could blend our school district with other school districts to try and get more of a
We do.
bulk rate? Oh, we do?
We do. We're in a consortium with other area districts already. And yes, we do blend our rates, and we do work. We have a fairly robust health insurance plan, and but yes, we do combine, we do work through the consortium.
Is that through the Tompkins County Consortium?
It's through our the school district.
It's just schools?
Just the schools, not with the county.
Okay.
Thank you.
Did I go through, is it okay? We're good? Okay. Special education, this current year, we ended up with $688,000 of real increases. We planned on a couple $100,000. We ended up with real increases because of an additional teacher. We had retro pay that we paid, which was given, we knew about that. We added 3 monitors, and we had almost 289,000, no, 230. Can you read that? I can't tell if it's an 8 or a 3. $288,000 in BOCES increases. So this, which again we're going to talk about in more detail, we have real increases in the budget of almost $700,000. We did have some increases in our budget lines that were not real increases, they were just budget adjustments. But you take this in combination of what we're looking at for next year in terms of increases for the same services, and look at the increase in BOCES services. These are due to placements that Angie's going to talk about in more detail. The point being is that when we were looking at a few $100,000 swing, and we end up with almost over $1 million swing in actual expenses, where our budget increase, budget to budget, is $1,063,000, and our actual increases over the last 2 from last year to next year projected are $1,136,000. It's a lot of money. So that's the biggest impact, and that's why we've chosen to spend a little more time explaining that impact on the budget. Questions?
The very bottom line there, increase from 2017-18 budget to 2018-19, is over $1 million.
Yes.
So doesn't that represent almost 5% of our budget?
Yes. 4%.
So in the slide that you were showing where the percentage of budget increase without the capital project in it, below these many slides ago.
Oh, the 5.5%? Yes.
So almost 5% of that 5.5 is special education?
Yes. Then we looked at the special education number. It's a big number, over $1 million. So how can we explain that? One of the biggest increases in BOCES services, so we looked at just the BOCES line in this particular instance. And in order to understand BOCES, you have to look at the students that have come into the district and where the placements have been and the total cost. So when we started back in in March 1st of 2018, we were projecting BOCES services as of $1.4 million. Only a month later, not even a month later, as we're going through meetings and looking at the different needs of the students, we're seeing that our BOCES projection is going up to $1.8 million. So this is where the variability is so difficult to forecast. I think I use the analogy of a boat on the water. If you have a big boat and you have these waves, you can handle it. You have enough, you can stay pretty steady. When you're in a smaller vessel, like a kayak or a canoe, you get a wave, might be the same size wave, but man, you're fighting to just stay stable.
And just a quick comment in there.
Yes.
So I think that the first column is the projected for 17-18, whereas the last two columns are the projected for 18-19. So actually from the end of March until current, we've decreased that projection for special ed for next year. Still much higher than what we projected for this year, but the projected for next year is lower than we had anticipated a few months ago.
Correct. So where we were projecting next year to go to close to $1.8 million, and as she said, it's lower at $1.6 million. We don't want to take that out of the budget because we need it for the variability. So we're leaving it in, and that $168,000 of additional savings we're going to leave in there for margin for next year.
Angie, I guess question for you, in column B right at the top, I assume that the number in parentheses is the number of students?
Correct.
So why, if there are 11 students in that column when we're projecting it in column A and it's decreased, has it gone up 40,000?
So that's what I was trying to point out. Column A is 17-18. Column B and C are 18-19. So you're comparing one year to another. So 17-18, the first column is this year. The last two columns are what we're projecting for next year.
But what Gary's saying.
So why has it gone up? The tuition costs have gone up, or related services are included in there. I mean, you have a student, it's not always, one student costs X amount. You have your base tuition in there, you have related services, you have increases in the COSER, depending on, how many kids are in the program.
So unlike career and tech program where it's just a flat fee for the number of students you're sending, you're saying this, even though there's a number of students listed there, it's really dependent on what services each one of those 11 kids is getting in column A and what those 9 kids in column B are getting?
And
Okay.
it's also built on the budget that BOCES builds. So let's say I'm making this up, let's say they have one fewer schools participating. For us to still send that same number of students could be an increased cost spread across the remaining component participating school districts. Different from career and tech where that's based on a 3-year average. So we don't see the spikes in career and tech, that's typically like a 3% increase from year to year. But special education is very different.
Or if the classroom isn't full, it's a classroom with 8 students and they've only filled it with 7, they have to divide it by 7 instead of 8, so it's not.
So it's not necessarily a per student charge, it's a budget shared by participating districts. Still factoring in the number of students that you're sending, but their budget is built and then divided. So like Angie said, if it's a classroom for 15 students and only 10 students are participating, they still staff it at the same level. So the expense is greater to the participating schools.
So they'll send out a projected base cost for a placement and option 2 with TST BOCES. And then at the end of the year, they'll come out with the actual cost for the placement and option 2.
So again, just to reiterate, we'd like to have a little margin in the budget, which is where we started with in 16-17. This year, the expenses far exceeded what we planned on for the increases. And we are, again, keep the 168,000 in BOCES and a little bit here and a little bit there. Those lines combined are creating what we have, what we think right now is a margin going into next year. So it's not a very, we don't have a lot of room, and I think we've spoken about that a couple of times. But we have some room for changes. Is that another question?
Nope.
Okay. This is where Angie.
Sure. So I'm going to speak a little more in depth about the special ed increases that we've seen for the last 2 years. But before I do that, I'm going to take a step back and kind of look at the bigger picture. So what I put together here is a historical trend data of the district of Trumansburg in general. So it's not just special education. Looking back, going back to 2013-14, all the way to 17-18. If you look at a couple of things, if I draw your attention to total enrollment, you can see that on average our enrollment's steady. We hover right around 1,000. We are the third largest district in the TST region, but we do hover right around 1,000, 1,100 in there. What is changing is the demographic of the students that we're getting. So even though our enrollment has stayed steady, if you look at two things, if you look to the right there, if you look at our number of students who are economically disadvantaged and then our percentage of students that are economically disadvantaged, although our enrollment has stayed steady for 5 years, we've seen an 11% increase in our economically disadvantaged, or students in poverty. So that's 100 more kids in our buildings that are needy in that way. On par with that, our number of students with disabilities and then our percentage of students with disabilities has increased. We were at 15.7 back in 13-14, we're up to 19. Please take that 19 with a grain of salt. I said this is the last board meeting. The statistic isn't out yet, it's based on BEDS data. So I ran those numbers by hand. We can never trust my by hand. So it was like 19.01. So we're certainly right around 18-19% for our classification rate, which is about a 3% increase over the last 5 years. There was a question at the last board meeting, how does that compare to other districts? So we're the third largest, we're also the third wealthiest, out of our small TST region, and we're the fifth in classification rate. So the classification rates in the region range from, and it would be based on 16-17 would be the last data that would be available, range from 12 to 18. So in that year we were 17. So we're in the range, we're in the middle, at the upper end of the range. We don't have the highest classification of districts in the region. Questions about that?
So share that statistic one more time, Angie. I'm not sure that I comprehended.
Which one?
Where we fit in the range of classifying students compared to other component school districts.
Okay, so 7 component school districts that I looked at, the range of classification, and so when you look at us, look at 16-17.
Okay, so we're at 17%.
We're at 17%, ranged from 12 to 18.
And how many districts were above our 17?
2.
And where did they fall compared to that same year in terms of students who are economically disadvantaged as a percentage of their enrollment?
Good question. Looking at it now. In general, you see a trend in the 7 component districts that the higher the rate of economically disadvantaged, the higher the special education rate. Is that always true? Am I trying to say there's a correlation between those two? Absolutely not. But I mean, at first glance, districts that tend to have a poverty rate higher, like 57%, would have a higher classification rate. And I certainly could compile that for the next one. I'm not on the fly talking about that.
Thank you.
Can you answer? And this is looking at our whole special ed population, right? Not just our BOCES component.
Correct.
Special ed.
Yeah, so I will get into all the major components of the special ed budget. So the three main components are salaries, staff salaries, monitors, and then our out-of-district placement. So no, that's a great question. So I will get into kind of those numbers where we are with out-of-district placements. In general, out of our special ed students in district, 86% of those we're servicing in district. 86% of the special ed population we're servicing in district. Only 3% of our total school population would go to an out-of-district placement. So again, this is going to be a little more big picture. As I just said, there's three. We saw, an increase of 1.2 million in special education. So I really wanted to break that down a little bit into the different components. I'm not going to talk about staff salaries, but I will talk about the two other major components: out of district placements and monitors. So this is a historical perspective of our out of district placements. And I put those titles across the top, not for us to concentrate on them, but I think just for the public to understand and the board to understand that it's not just BOCES that are out of district placements. This would include tuition payments, George Junior, residential. We have students, regional alternative school, we have students placed at multiple places out of district, as does any district in the region. So if we look, this is, again, a multi-year comparison. And I think the first thing that stands out, if you go to the far right there and you look at total, anyone that was looking at this chart would notice, hey, in 14-15, we only had 15 kids placed out of district. Anticipated for 18-19, we have 30. Wow, that's double our kids that we have in out of district placement. So I wanted to take some time to kind of dig into that and explain that a little bit. So if you look at both 16-17 and 17-18, that's where you're going to see the biggest jump in out of district placements. And to explain that, what I did was broke down even further was how many of those students were move-in students. So in 16-17, sorry, go back. In 16-17, 4.4 doesn't mean we placed half a student. It's broken down by month. So kids are moving in and out all the time. Kid moves in January, they're placed in January, they're a 0.5 placement. So 4.4, or 4 or 5 students were move-ins in 16-17, and 7.5, or 27% of the total, were move-ins in 17-18. So what that equates to is that 13 out of our current 27 students that are placed out of district are move-in students. And by that, I mean lateral placements. They're a student that has never set foot on this campus. If I say to Jeannie, Josh, or John, who's a student, they're not going to know. The family moved into the district. Their previous district had them placed at a very similar program. We either just took on footing that bill where they were, or placed them in a very similar program. These are all lateral placements.
5-part question.
I only do 2 parts. Yeah.
I'll group it. TSD BOCES I'm familiar with as far as that's what we travel to and from every day.
I'm sorry, TSD?
TSD BOCES is what we travel to and from every day.
Yes.
Regional alternative, is that the one down in Ithaca, the alternative school?
Yep.
Okay.
It's now on the BOCES campus.
It's on the BOCES campus. It's not New Roots. It's the
Okay, New Roots is the one down on Elm Street or whatever. Okay. So George Junior and Hillside, this is how I'm going to group them together. They live there. They live on those campuses, or are they being transported every day?
Not necessarily. George Junior has a day school component as
Yes.
well as a residential component.
So just like the TSD, when we drive them over to the
Correct.
Warren
We have
Road
students
campus,
that are
then we take them over to the George Junior.
Correct. We have students who are bused daily to
Okay.
day school.
And
But
Hillside's the same way?
No, Hillside is a residential.
Residential, okay. And then other BOCES, obviously outside of TSD, is that because of the special needs category, or is it because of maybe a different program that's offered that we don't offer at ours?
Both.
10-4. Okay. Too easy, thanks.
We good?
I guess, where are these, are we tracking where our move-ins are coming from?
I don't have data on that, but certainly overall.
I'm just trying to see if there's like some sort of a trend where they're moving to Trumansburg for a reason. Because we offer great service, because we offer, but beyond our obvious community components, are they moving here because of our services that we're offering here in the school district as well?
I'd be speculating a guess at that, but we certainly are a desirable district.
In age range?
Age range is all
Grade?
across the board, K-12.
K-12.
I mean, you get more mobility in students that are younger, typically, but all across the board. So this slide is a further breakdown of those 7.5 move-ins. I also have 2 that I'll explain at the bottom there, because we had such a large unexpected increase in the budget this year. So I'm not talking about next year, I'm talking about the increase from what we projected this time last year to what actually happened this year. And please understand that special ed is a moving target. You know, students move in and out, needs increase, needs decrease. It's very, very hard to predict. We did have an unusually high, you know, I've been doing this for 15 years, an unusually high amount of students move into the district. We have a lot of students move in all the time, late in the year. So budget season is, we know, now this is the end, we're wrapping up budget season. Budget season and planning really starts January, February, ends right around early November. In my mind, January, February, ends right about now. So I think what I wanted to point out by this slide is that these students that moved in were April of 17 to August of 17 even, so very late in the year, April, May, June, over the summer. After they created, there was no way to anticipate that this cost was coming. So I don't want to get into too much detail, you know, to keep confidentiality and all of that, but I think just, and I guess I also feel bad about this slide sometimes. I don't want to put a price tag on kids, but I just wanted to give you a snapshot of what one student, what a placement can look like and what that can do to the budget. So if you look at the 7 students at the top there, their move-ins alone are, you know, over $300,000. The 2 students at the bottom were students that have been our students for longer, but their placements came back higher than anticipated. Either their needs were higher, or there was a change. So those 2 together total almost $500,000. Okay. Another large component of the special education budget is monitors and TAs. So I also put together some historical data for that, going back to 14-15. So I did break it down by building and broke it down by type of position. But if you look across again to that final column to total, what you're going to see is, if you kind of just glance down there, is that we stay fairly stable in our monitor and TA use. There is some change. We certainly are having a real push and embracing moving away from 1-to-1 aids, not completely, but and moving to more shared aids, 2 kids sharing an aid, 3 kids sharing an aid, moving to a classroom aid. So really changing in the buildings how we're using that monitor support to be able to support more kids and more independence for our kids who need adult support. We do have a large number of monitors. We are one of several districts, not many, that house as many self-contained programs in-house as we do. We are certainly known for that we place less students in BOCES programs than many component districts because we do have several in-house self-contained programs. We have 2 at the elementary. One is for kindergarten, 1st and 2nd. It's an 8-1-1 classroom. So it's a multi-grade classroom of just kids with disabilities. We also have a very similar program in 3rd and 4th. And then we have our local board program, our 12-1-1 program at the middle school. Those programs, under regulation, have to have a teacher and a TA or monitor in there at all times because of the needs. Many of those students also require additional adult support, and because of the multi-grade level, those kids are typically in those classrooms for their core academics and they're pushing out into music, lunch, tech, science, maybe some gen ed programs with adult support. So of our 28 monitors, I think 9 or 10 of them are linked to those in-house programs, keeping our kids in district. We are anticipating a reduction of 4 monitors for next year.
So I'll just add to that, Andrew just put out there publicly that we're anticipating a reduction in 4 monitors for next fiscal. However, we're not being insensitive. We have not had conversations with personnel because those individuals in monitor positions tend to fluctuate frequently. Sometimes people don't return, sometimes people go out on leave, sometimes people resign, sometimes move into teaching positions. So to have those conversations now would be premature, and it may not be the correct people that we spoke with. Additionally, we have done this in the past and said we're reducing by 4 or 5 monitors, and by August we added 5 back in. So we don't want to cause anyone that unnecessary distress. So.
I do know one other thing. There was a question at the last board meeting about our mobility data just in general. I talked in depth about our students that are moving in, our mobility data for our out-of-district placements, and to take the time to look at that data for students with special needs that are in-house. So I don't have a slide for that, but I can tell you we had for this year, for 17-18, we had a total of 81 students move into the district. Of those, across K-12, all students, of those 81, 25 were students with special ed needs, or 31%. That's a very high percentage. I mean, our classification rate is 17, 18, 19. That's right around, state average is about 16, 17. So you would project that 16 or 17% of your kids moving in with students with special ed needs. We have 31%.
Angie, could you say those numbers again? 81 students, pre-K-12 moved into the district?
K-12.
K-12 moved into the district. Of that, how many were special ed?
25.
25.
Which equals 31%. 30% at the elementary, 50% at the middle school, and 12.5% at the high school. Much less over at the high school level. Those are very high numbers. Very high percentages.
So, I mean, I know that's totally out of our control, but that's an unsustainable, if that percentage continues, that's unsustainable for this school district or any school district. Is the state addressing this in any way? Or do they see it as such an anomaly or so few districts that they don't care about it?
I haven't asked them that, so I didn't mean that.
No,
I don't know. I understand your concern.
Yeah.
The only other thing I can tell you is that, you're constantly, Laura alluded to, we're a small boat. So, we're constantly looking at what's the population of our students who are placed at TSD BOCES. Do we have 4 or 5 students that are in a similar program? Could we create our own in-house program and bring those students back? Would that be cost effective and best for the students? So right now that's not feasible. We have a student maybe in 3rd grade, a student in 6th grade. You can't group 2 students together. If our numbers rose, you may have enough students to create an in-house program. Other than that, I can't answer why we're moving here and what we would do if we continue to see numbers like this.
And I'm not aware of any changes that the state's making in terms of the escalating numbers, both of poverty, students in poverty, and students of special needs.
I'm not aware. Are you aware of, Lauren, of other districts that have been hit this hard this year?
I've heard about, well, not locally, in other areas, yes. And it's a constant struggle, and one of the reasons why I'm so adamant when we talk about the restrictions that are placed on us as a district in terms of reserves, and the comptroller's need to constantly demand that we keep it at 4%, for example, when we're the oldest, when other municipalities, cities are allowed a reasonable standard. I don't think that the 4% is necessarily enough for us for smaller districts to be able to handle those kinds of fluctuations. And now that's something that they seem to be going in the opposite direction of demanding that the reserves come down, demanding that you use them, demanding that you go into the 4. But it's, in terms of strong fiscal planning, the more you have there, the better you're going to be able to absorb these. If you hadn't done the planning you've done in the past 10 years, you wouldn't have the resources to be able to plan for those fluctuations. And some districts are in dire situations when they get hit with escalating costs without the reserves and the fund balance to provide for it. So in
We
reality.
were very well positioned to
Yes.
absorb this year. So although these are big numbers for us to hear as a community, we were well positioned to handle it.
And we are also working very hard, hand in hand, to increase the revenue side as well. That's not what this, presentation is about, but there are some additional revenue sources, and, we're constantly looking at that.
Yes, but the state hasn't changed any of the guidelines in terms of their reimbursements.
Correct.
There are some sources of revenues depending on,
Medicaid, but it's going to be a drop in the bucket too.
they're not significant enough for us to say that if we have these escalating costs, we're going to be able to get it. We can't.
We need a bigger boat.
We need a bigger boat, or, and thankfully you planned well, so, and you have the resources to be able to at least,
We do now, but with the pressure on the state to spend those resources down, we're not in the future.
Then I would say, that's where I probably issue opinions that you're in much better shape to take the advice but keep the resources. There are a lot of districts that continue to push back and say, yes, we understand there's 4%, but we need more, we need the reserves, and we need those for those unplanned expenses. There's a lot of that pushback across the state.
Well, we had those reserves from 10 years ago, and they weren't we had those funds, they weren't moved to the appropriate reserves at the time, so we got dinged for that.
Predates the current administration.
Right.
Predates.
But we benefited from that because that's what we've been able to use these last 10 years. But it was, the government telling us that was inappropriate when we knew that those reserves would be needed for the future. So they don't allow us to do what happened. And that was, not misappropriation or misuse of it. It just hadn't been moved to the appropriate reserve. So we had them, and it's been a benefit. But they've tied our hands in the past 10 years from continuing to do that. As Gary said, so we've been forced to use those resources. Yeah. Which we benefited from, which has been great, but.
Good.
Yep.
Copy of the property tax report card, which again is in the publication that will be going out tomorrow. So we'll spend a lot of time on that. It reiterates the amount of taxes that we're collecting, both for the district and for the library. As you can see, the district budget, what we'll be collecting in taxes, what we're collecting for the library. Just basically at the bottom, it's a projected enrollment and the CPI increase. This is a reiteration of the reserves, the end of last year, the end of this year, what we estimate, and the end of what we're estimating at the end of next year. So you can see that we we were looking at 4.14% of the unrestricted fund balance, and we're estimating that by the end of next year, we're going to spend that, if we spend that down, we'll be down to 3.25.
So, well, maybe not. Mike is going to put that here. Continue on.
Okay. This is a list of the reserves that we have. A new requirement from the state is that we list all the reserves that we're using, and we lay those out as well, and they give us, they ask for the balances in March, the balances forecasted or estimated at the end of this year, and what we plan on using them for next year. So as you can see, we have about $4.5 million ending this year. Next year's budget, we're looking at putting $500,000 in, so we should have a $5 million in that reserve. And if we start the capital project, we plan, it's a shot in the dark, about $1 million, $1.2 million in expenditures out of those reserves next year to start the capital project. $300,000 for bus purchases. We don't plan on using any of the repair reserve. $10,000 a year we're using to defray unemployment, and the biggest increase out of the reserves outside of capital is $329,000 that we use for the employee retirement reserve out of reserve. Questions on those? And that's it. Budget vote, May 15th.
Thank you very much. Okay. With that, we'll adjourn to our regular meeting. So, motion to approve the minutes as presented?
Yes. I have corrected.
Okay. Jane?
That was my comment regarding food service, was not to keep us in line with other districts, but simply to be in alignment with the federal reimbursement. Minor change.
Okay. Can you share that with Tina after the
Sure.
meeting so that we can make that change and correction for next time? All right. Or I guess we can do it now and accept them as amended.
As amended, right?
Okay. Then, motion to accept as amended?
So second.
Questions or discussions on that? All right. So it will be accepted as presented. Open forum. At this time, we'd like to give our audience an opportunity to ask any questions about this agenda or about operations within the school district. Personnel matters will not be addressed in public session. Comments may be recorded and responded to by the Board of Education or the superintendent within 24 to 48 hours. We ask that you introduce yourself to the board, state if you are a district resident, and you keep your comments to 5 minutes or less. Yes.
Do you want me up there or here? My name is Starlyn Overbaugh. I am a resident of the district. My daughter attends the elementary school. I have questions about the process. It was really good to see the information about how the district has grown or declined. I'm a Rotarian as well, and somebody said something about the new zoning proposal, saying how our enrollment's declining here, and I was like, I've got proof to the otherwise. In any case, my questions are, how does the district work its way to understanding how many people it needs to service all 1,100 students, particularly when there's fluctuations? One of the things that you brought up was that you don't talk to people mid-year when a fluctuation occurs. And I'm just curious about that process. Is that done at the board level? Is that done at the individual school level? How does that take shape?
Well, and I realize that this is your first time at a board meeting, and so one of the shifts that we've tried to make in board meetings from previous years to this year is to accept questions and then be able to respond back to you at a later date, as opposed to engage in a dialogue. Now, we got a little off of that in the budget meeting tonight, but my rationale for that, which hasn't been shared until now, is that we're asking you to vote on that. So we want questions asked and answered clearly at the time that it's being presented. Since that's not the case, we'll be happy to take your question.
That's fine. I had no expectation of getting an answer tonight. That's fine.
Yeah, I guess my general comment was directed towards the rest of the audience. You just happen to be the first person, so I thank you for that.
So that, I have 5 minutes, right? So,
Yeah, and I used 2 of them, so.
Thanks. Just understanding, I think, as a parent, and this is not my first time at a Board of Education meeting, not just this district, it happens to be, but understanding as you put together a budget, which, by the way, kudos on that, holy guacamole, that's a lot. As you put that together and as you're proposing information, especially when you're talking about $1 million, for me, no problem. That's the fluctuation, that's life. But as you start, we live in a very interesting community where we have people that have different opinions on that, particularly when it comes to the new zoning coming up. There's this opinion that, big property owners shouldn't have to pay school taxes if they don't have kids on the land. Well, if you want smart farmers, perhaps you should put them and pay the taxes. But in any case, I think it would behoove the board to really specify how things are done in a manner that would be like a mixer or something that, I mean, I can come to a board meeting, that's fine, but not everyone can. So just thinking about that as you put together plans and budgets and things like that. And I'm a social media maven, so if you need help with that, I can help.
Well, great.
But I'm not running for board. So thank you.
I just want to ask some clarification so that when the board responds to your question, unless you feel like you haven't.
No,
Oh, okay. So is the question, how do we build the budget? What is that based on? How do we decide how many students in our classroom? What program?
Well, it is. I understand it's a very large question.
It's okay.
What I'm asking is, as years different quantity of student fluctuates,
yes.
How do you determine how many teachers you're going to have, how you're going to budget for that, and therefore how those decisions are made from year to year? So like the mentioning of...
There is a process, so we'll respond to in writing, and I believe Gary will likely read that at the next, Mr. Estels will read that at the next board meeting, but there is a process in place.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anyone else? Okay, hearing none, opportunity now for representatives or members of the Trumansburg Teachers Association to share any concerns that they may have in terms of the operation of the district. Again, personnel matters will not be discussed in public session. And the same offer to representatives or members of the support staff. Any questions or concerns that they'd like to share, opinions with the board? Okay, thank you very much. Agenda changes. We do have one item to add under new business K, and that's a revised budget report card. I believe the only change is that on the first one, the library budget line was not on the original report card, and it is required to be. So other than that, there are no changes, just that addition. So that will be a new item under new business. Correspondence, we had several postcards regarding concern for our curriculum, specifically on slavery, from Southern Poverty Law and concerned members. So Pam, I would ask you as our curriculum coordinator to help us understand what we're doing and where we're going with that. Thank you.
Well, we received some correspondence from some folks in the community about our curriculum involving slavery, K-12. They referenced this document, which is the Southern Poverty Law Center report that just came out, stating that I think they said like 8% of students, seniors in high school, were not able to answer these questions concerning slavery. So we did some digging. I gathered the social studies department, and we did a little inventory of what our curriculum looked like on this particular issue. And we kind of connected the dots together and noticed where our gaps were and how in places where we wanted to do better. And so we were really grateful for this tool, which also gave us some recommendations on how to strengthen our curriculum in this area. It gave us a textbook rubric to use. We talked about textbooks quite a bit, and happily, we're not using too many textbooks. We're using primary sources, which is what is recommended, and that's really an excellent thing. So I have great confidence in your staff. I just want to toot our staff's horn. They really know their stuff, and they're doing their very, very best, and particularly with this topic. And we know where we have to do some more work, and we'll continue to do a deeper dive on this and really amp it up a little bit more. And we'll use this as a resource, so we thank them for sharing it with us.
Any questions for Pam? Any glaring omissions? I'm sure there's always room for improvement, but...
There is, and I think Trumansburg's unusual. You've got some really savvy staff, especially on this topic. I spoke with Emmanuel Sestero for a long time today. He's a really smart guy, particularly on this, very passionate about this topic. So we're very lucky that we have him here for that. Well, the biggest thing that we noted was that our state standards don't do a great job. So right now, ironically, what we've started to do is talk about how do we reconcile what the standards are telling us to teach, what we're actually teaching, and what we want to be teaching, and what really matters to our kids. So we're trying to find that, reconcile all those three things together. Because some of that's just not in our standards. It's not asking us to teach that. So I think at the state level, it's lacking. But we're certainly touching on it. We start really heavily with it in 4th grade moving forward. So we're talking about how do we be more specific and targeted about what it is we're doing at each grade level and not wait till they get to 11th grade. So.
Yeah, they actually evaluated a number of states, and New York was one of them. And while we didn't come out at the bottom of the heap, we weren't really great either. It is a lengthy document, but the introduction is by Dr. Jeffries that is just, I wish everyone could read it. It is beautifully, beautifully stated and wonderfully written.
Well, it's on teachingtolerance.org, so you could go online and get it if you're interested in looking. And there's actually a second document that I pulled from there that is a framework for how to teach better and how to strengthen your curriculum. So we're actually looking at this document to help us.
Yeah, they came up with 15 points.
Yes.
I think of being able to say this is where you can you can evaluate where you're going. I just have one quick question for you, and you may shoot me afterwards. Primary sources is something that they encourage, and you have pointed out the fact that we currently use primary sources. Would you define for me what we consider to be, I know what I think is a primary source.
They're sources that are right from the horse's mouth. They're not secondhand. We do use textbook, or not textbooks, articles and things that were written at the time that are opinion pieces. Primary sources would be the actual Declaration of Independence or
diaries, letters.
Yes, letters.
How are our children going to read them because they're written in cursive?
That's a whole other conversation.
Actually, they're written in copperplate or something else, but that just dawned on me that. Wait a minute.
So our librarians are heavily part of the conversation. Primary sources has become a big focus and a big shift for social studies in the state. So they're our resource for that. They're just a wealth of knowledge for us in that aspect. So the other thing that we're doing right now is having some conversations between the English department and the social studies department of cross-content planning. So what that might look like to do a more of a humanities approach on some topics, and that would help with these types of things, with like primary sources, citing, and that kind of thing.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Other correspondence that the board received, Brad Farnham was shared with us an article on robotics and their contribution to student extracurricular activities, and the strength maybe of those types of programs over maybe sports and some of the baggage that comes with sports, i.e. irate parents, unprofessional conduct by fans and players and the article was quick to point out that's not at all what you see at robotics competitions. In fact, quite the opposite. So we thank Brad for that, and we acknowledge the robotics team's great performance in Detroit. So congratulations to them.
So there's actually a term that's called gracious professionalism, and it's a phenomenal concept, and they really, really exemplified it throughout that whole time. So, yeah.
Great, thank you very much, Mike. We also had a letter from a parent concerning issue in one of our buildings. So we won't go into detail on that, but that has been addressed by the appropriate people in the building. And we have also received a letter from a district resident asking the board not to support the Hamilton Square project. The concern by the parent was that the addition of students, additional students that project might generate would negatively impact our ability to offer programs from pre-K through 12. So the board has not taken a position on that in the past, but we thank the resident for sharing their opinion with us and that. Okay. Committee reports. Douglas, I think if you have anything, you are the only committee report.
Well, we had a Central New York meeting last night at MACNY, which I repeat all the time. It's the Manufacturers Association for Central New York. And we are currently housed there, the Central New York School Boards Association, because we really wanted to develop a partnership with the businesses in the area. And I was very happy to hear that although they have up until this point pretty much been focusing on the immediate Syracuse area, they're getting ready to push out to the middle school. So that was welcome news to me. And to get to your earlier comments on whether other, particularly rural schools, are seeing the same shifts in special ed that we are. They are. We're all in about the same boat, and there's quite a bit of concern. That, along with shrinking populations in some areas of New York, has really hit schools hard. And I think, let me see, I'm trying to position myself here. For BOCES, we are up and running with the new BTEC program. We are in the process of hiring everybody we need, actually. We have to have them in by the end of the month, I believe, so that we can start planning over the summer. But this is the 6-year program that I think I've mentioned before, possibly not? Yeah. Okay. Whereby we have them for either 2 or 4 years, depending on how quickly they're moving through the program. And then they go up to TC3 for the additional 2 years. We're starting with just 2 PTEC options. In fact, one of them we haven't decided yet. The other will be welding, which is quite popular at this point in time. So I guess we're going to go that routine. I haven't really seen the spreadsheets on what the curriculum is going to look like yet, but people are really excited. And I know TC3 is being very welcoming and very eager to get going with all of us. So we'll have more
questions for Douglas?
later. Yes. Welding?
Was it the last TACA meeting and they were saying it was advanced manufacturing?
Advanced manufacturing, but
Yeah,
welding, well, yeah.
Okay.
Is one of the components. I'm sorry, I probably should not have emphasized that.
No, I was just a little bit confused. I do have a question that was brought up at the TACA meeting. I don't know if it's something.
It's not open forum.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry.
Thank you. We'll catch you at the end, though.
No, that's fine.
Great.
Circles back.
Thank you. Administrators report, Jeannie?
So where's Jean? So I had built the agenda with Mr. Abstels,
Okay.
and we
want to wait on this.
at that time, I was going to ask Jean to speak tonight about our pre-K program and our new enrollment process. So we learned some new things as late as this afternoon. So what I want to say is we have a good problem. Our pre-K program, this is the 3rd year running, in which Trumansburg has owned the program. And prior to that, it was more of a Head Start program. And at that time, they had enrollment policy and procedures that was based on federal income guidelines. And the new good problem that we have is that our program is so successful and being run so well by a combination of faculty and administration that typically this time of year we have 30 students that are wishing to enroll in the program. We can accommodate 54. We recently had a list as large as 60. So we had a parent information meeting and we opened it up and said that we would be implementing a new enrollment guideline or procedure. And at that time, we believed that it would be based on federal income guidelines. I learned late this afternoon that we are not actually able to do that because it is not a Head Start program. It is partially, and I say partially, meaning very little, there's a contribution by a grant, a federal grant. So it does hold the name Universal Pre-K, which to some of you may understand that to mean enrollment is for everyone. However, because it is partially grant funded, our enrollment is actually capped. So thankfully, I had the right contact today and learned that we will actually be doing a random lottery for anyone that's interested in enrolling. And at this time, some of those guidelines include the child has to be age 4 by December 4th, and they, or I'm sorry, December 1st. December 1st. And they need and they need to be a resident of our community. So with that, it's very new information. We need to craft a communication piece to go out to our families that are interested. We'll get something on the website, and there's still some nuances in there. I know that probably generates more questions than answers right now, so it is new information, but I at least wanted to get that piece of it out, that we thought we had a process and that has changed slightly this afternoon. So more news to come on pre-K. Do you need to add anything to that, Jeannie, or wish to? Okay. Good problem to have.
Thank you very much.
Is that not open, is that open for a question or no?
We'll wait until.
That's an open forum.
Open forum, how's that?
Thank you.
We're going back to the rules
Yeah,
that we
thank you.
typically operate by.
Waited just for that part, all right.
Student report, Mr. King, would you like to do any update for student report?
No.
Okay, very well. Moving on to consent agenda. Or were you being sarcastic and I didn't read
It's
it?
really not, what I shared at the last meeting is pretty much the same.
Okay, sounds good. Consent agenda, is there any items that the board would like to pull from the consent agenda? Hearing none, may I have a motion to accept the consent agenda as presented? Those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries. Thank you. On to new business. May I have a motion for approval to create the Director of Curriculum position by 1.0 FTE. Be it resolved that upon the recommendation of the Superintendent of Schools, the Board of Education for the Trumansburg Central School District hereby approves the creation of the title Director of Curriculum at 1.0 FTE. This position will be applied to the terms provided in the current Trumansburg Leadership Agreement.
So moved.
Second? Questions, discussion? None. Okay. So this was a position that we saw presented in the budget and it changed over from where it was in the BOCES position previously to the administrative budget.
And so the difference for our district is that we purchased a service through TST BOCES, which allowed us to have a director of curriculum 4 days a week. And we have learned very quickly this school year that that position is really key to the success of our district. We do need leadership in that area because the standards are changing and there is so much work to be done to support the good work that's already happening. So we wish to move that position to 5 days a week, meaning that that allocated line in the budget still exists. We take it out of the BOCES line. We add to that the aid that we will get next year from BOCES, which levels out this new position. So it's not a hit to the budget, as one might think.
Great, thank you. Any other questions or concerns? Hearing none, those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries. May I have a motion for setting the entry-level salary. Be it resolved that upon the recommendation of the superintendent of schools, the Board of Education hereby establishes the following salary for 2018-19 school year for the Director of Curriculum at $90,564 per year.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Questions or discussion? Hearing none, those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries. Motion, may I have a motion to, for an entry-level salary? Be it resolved that upon the recommendation of the superintendent of schools, the Board of Education hereby establishes the following salary for the 17-18 school year effective May 5th for a substitute bus driver at $25 per hour.
So moved.
Second? Okay. Questions or discussion? Hearing none, those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries. May I have a motion for the approval to increase bus driver position by 1.0 FTE? Be it resolved that upon the recommendation of the superintendent of schools, the Board of Education for the Trumansburg Central School District hereby approves the increase of the civil service title bus driver at 1.0 FTE. This position will be applied to the terms provided in the current support staff agreement.
So moved.
Second? Deb, questions? Concerns? Hearing none. Those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries. And may I have a motion to provide professional auditing services from the Bonadio Group? Be it resolved that upon the recommendation of the superintendent of schools, the Board of Education for the Trumansburg Central School District hereby accepts the April 13, 2018 proposal from the Bonadio Group for professional auditing services as presented.
So moved.
Second.
Questions? This is for the following year?
This will start in July.
July. Okay, so our new fiscal year.
Correct.
Okay. Any other questions? Hearing none, those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? I'll abstain. Motion carries. May I have a motion of approval to sign a contract between TSCD and Geneva City School District? Be it resolved that the Board of Education for the Trumansburg Central School District hereby authorizes the President, Superintendent, and District Clerk of the Board to sign to provide health and welfare services to 2 students attending non-public schools located in the city of Geneva, New York at a per pupil cost of $409.44 due for the 17-18 school year as presented.
So moved.
Second? Second. Questions, discussion? Hearing none, those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries. May I have a motion for approval of curriculum projects? Be it resolved that upon the recommendation of the superintendent of schools, the Board of Education for the Trumansburg Central School District hereby approves the following curriculum projects as listed for the 2017-18 school year.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Questions? Hearing none, those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries. Ooh, one of my favorite motions. May I have a motion for acceptance of donation? Be it resolved that upon the recommendation of the superintendent of schools, the Board of Education for the Trumansburg Central School District hereby accepts the donation of $2,241 from the Trumansburg Central School District Foundation for Elementary School Students, participation in Kids Discovery Trail as presented.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Questions or discussion?
Yay.
Yay, yes, thank you very much. Those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries. Motion for acceptance of donation. Be it resolved that upon the recommendation of the superintendent of schools, the Board of Education for the Trumansburg Central School District hereby accepts the donation of $4,482 from the Discovery Trail for elementary school students, participation in Kids Discovery Trail as presented.
Second?
Questions or discussion?
Yay.
Yay again, yay twice. Thank you very much, wow, 2 fabulous donations. Those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries. And may I have a motion for the acceptance of a revised property tax report card as presented? Second? Sarah? Questions or discussion? Okay, this was simply the change to include the library funding that was omitted previously. Those in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries. All right, we're now back to open forum. Oh, board forum. No. Board forum is last. Open forum, okay. Open forum, at this time, we'd like, again, to give our audience an opportunity to ask any questions about this agenda or about operations within the school district. Personnel matters will not be discussed or addressed in public session. Comments may be recorded and responded to by the Board of Education or superintendent within 24 to 48 hours. We ask that you introduce yourself to the board, state if you are a district resident, and that you keep your comments to 5 minutes or less. May.
Question. I was able to find my own answer.
Oh, you got your own, are you sure?
Yep.
Oh, thank you.
Deanne.
Deanna Krantz, Trumansburg resident. One question about the pre-K. How does that affect the teachers that are in the district, that work in the district but don't live in the district? Will their kids have an opportunity?
That is one of the nuances that we still need to look more deeply into.
Maureen Challenge, Trumansburg. So thank you for your comments about the standards not really limiting what we're able to offer our students. And it's nice to know that our Washington DC trip, the children will have the chance. I saw it as a question mark on the form that are they going to the African American Museum? Because that site also has a wealth of information for school districts to be able to share. It was a question mark on their form. And regarding that trip, it said the number of students going and the cost. Is that all the 8th grade students going, or how many students are going? And is the cost completely covered by the fundraising? And we have scholarships, I assume, for students to go.
I could just do my own answer part of it. So,
You're making it tough, Ms.
I know. We want to stick to the rules, but we really haven't all night, so why start now? So the Washington DC trip this year is funded by the general fund. We've tied it to the curriculum, so
Great.
It is a general education field trip, so to speak, which means that we will accept, if we haven't already, and I've lost track, a donation from essentially an 8th grade boosters. And that donation will come into the district to offset that expense. And this allows the opportunity for all students to attend. We've done that in the past and we've offered scholarships, but now it's just part of the general fund.
Great.
For those students wishing to participate, it's often hard to get 100% participation.
In the budget, I know at one point, one of the meetings you're having about budget talks was increasing the staffing for the libraries back to having a librarian for each building, but am I assuming that because
so I
of
might
these,
as well just keep answering the question.
it is not in there?
So that was a priority that our administrative team had met with their faculties independently and brought that to the table to say that was a desire or wish of the district. However, when we looked more closely at that, because it was a straight up ad, we were uncertain if that was sustainable for the next 3 years. So at this point, we still know it's a wish, it's still a need, but we didn't feel that we should fund that this year until we had some more certainty about some of those special education increases in the future years to come.
Okay. So in that light of sustainable, the pre-K program is not, we're not able to sustain it and offer it to all children of the district as we have in the past. We've offered it to all in the past, but we've not had the enrollment that has filled it to capacity.
Again, a true statement. So when we look to add program, we look to add that program 3 to 5 years. And in our current fiscal climate, we're not, we still need to build margin into the budget. And so if we were to add all of these pieces, It takes away the margin, and it's not necessarily sustainable. We don't know if the increases that we've seen this year and we're projecting for next year in special education, if that's an anomaly or if we'll continue to climb. So we need to be cautious. The things that we have added in terms of pulling the director of curriculum that 5th day into our district, that's sustainable because that budget line was already there. And again, we add the aide to that position, same as our director of IT. That line has been there for years. We just paid it out to BOCES. So now we're just pulling it in-house and we're keeping that aide in-house. So those are not straight up positions when you're trying to compare them to some of these other program initiatives.
Okay. I would just as you discussed it, a couple meetings ago, one of the athletic programs, there was such an enrollment in it, I don't know if it was track or whatever, and that you found creative ways so that no child would be cut from that program. I would hate to see any child in this district be cut from this opportunity to take part in a pre-K program. Although I'm a great supporter of the community nursery school and those options being there for other students. I find it a challenge for our district to offer a program that we're not able to offer to all students in our community, as we've been able to do in the past. But you build a program, and I would like great consideration for them to be able to take part in it.
Noted.
Thanks.
I'd actually like to, Darlene Overbaugh, Shermansburg, I'd like to second what Maureen was saying. I think that it's something to consider, and since you have some data from how many students have, if you're looking strictly at data for pre-K use, how many of those pre-K students have continued on and stayed within the district, but also if they're not receiving the services at the pre-K level, how that might impact your budget at the additional needs level. If you're concerned about the tidal wave now, it's very possible that that could have repercussions. So I would second what Maureen has said, and that we really do need to find a way. And if we're able to accept donations from other sources, like you just voted in tonight, I would strongly recommend that.
Thank you.
Staying on I asked him to abstain from it, which is not a pre-K question. So just a clarification on that, we're an open lottery versus the one that was configured off the federal program.
Mm-hmm.
So I think I heard you correctly say that our cap was 54.
Correct.
And at this point we have a 60 enrollment, so we're short 6. So we'll have an open lottery, not based on any type of criteria, and then there'd be 6 children left over?
Well, that's assuming that those that have expressed interest all still apply.
Sure.
So sometimes people apply and somebody relocates because they've taken a different job, or some people may express interest and then say, this is too much of a gamble, I'm going to keep my child at X pre-K
Sure.
or daycare, wherever, because they just don't want to gamble not getting in. So,
Or then maybe they'll apply, get picked in the lottery, or not, and then not get picked and then go someplace else. But how much lead time do we give them where we say, here's the lottery, here's the dates, you didn't make it?
decisions, families will be informed by May 22nd.
Okay. And then one final question, random. The auditing service that you guys voted in tonight, is that a new thing or just a new company?
It is the same firm that we have been.
Okay.
However, state ed requires that, I think it's every 4 years?
Okay.
Every 5 years that we put out a request for proposal.
There was a big, I saw it in the minutes, there was a big, like almost like an advertisement from that company, you know, talking about who their people were. And so I wondered if it was like a new marketing thing to try and get you guys to go to them. So this is something we do all the time, we just had to re-up. Understood. Thank you.
Michael Hunter, Trumansburg. So phenomenal that I see this project Lead the Way planning. So are we looking, is this just in the introductory to start understanding how their curriculum is set up, or are we actually starting to initiate this project Lead the Way?
I could answer you, but Jean, I'm going to let Jean answer you, because I'm just 1 year in, but I know that the elementary school is heavily into it.
So I think this is our 3rd year
Okay.
doing the launch program. So we are doing Project Lead the Way in kindergarten, 1st, 2nd, and 3rd currently, or through 2nd. third and fourth, we have all the materials, and now that we think we are over a technical hurdle, we'll be able to get third and fourth doing it as well.
So are we looking at any other levels or just in the elementary? Because doesn't that go through other
There are
K-12?
different programs.
There's a program at the high school level I'd like to sit down with you about.
Okay.
The rationale as to why it's not in our building.
Okay.
But I can talk about that for hours with you.
Yeah, sounds good.
I have a question.
Yes.
Ginger Mosher, Kinder resident. Has there been any consideration with the preschool program in our district now of putting monitors on all the buses that transport these 4-year-olds?
Joe, unfortunately, is not here this evening. I believe the 4-year-olds can be transported and they do not require a monitor. So at this point, we have monitors on buses because it's driven by an individualized education plan, not necessarily age-driven.
No account's been taken in for the care that they require on the bus?
It has not been something that has been part of our budget conversation, no.
Other questions from the audience? Thank you very much for your active participation tonight.
And next board meeting, we'll go back to the formality of our rules. But I appreciate the exchange.
Board forum. Do any members of the board have thoughts, ideas that they'd like to share as part of board forum?
Just briefly, if members of our policy committee were talking about this earlier, that I finally finished our little project, that if you're interested, I can send you an Excel spreadsheet which lists all of the policies and their date of acceptance, so the month and the year, so that you can see that we still have a way to go with our goal of doing it and having the policy between them over the years old. So we've done a pretty decent job, but we've got a way to go. So if you're interested in it, I will be happy, I can either give you a copy, or if it's in Excel, you can sort it in any number of ways that you want.
That would be great to send it to us in Excel, Jim. Thank you very much.
Yeah, and I think policy, we're going to have to take a look at some of these some can be very easily, quickly reviewed. There's no changes except the fact that we should put our eyes on them. So we're liable to present 6 or 7 of them at a board meeting, but not to overwhelm you, but just to simply say, give you a chance, and new board members as well, a chance to be able to see what those policies are. So, and if any of you see any that you'd like us to review, please let us know. Thank you.
Anyone else? So I think that's a good segue. One of the things that we have discussed very informally is how we go about selecting or maybe strengthening our student members' participation. And so I think we'd like at some point to engage Mr. King in a conversation, 1 or 2 representatives from the board, in terms of maybe how the board could have a little larger role in that process.
Policy number 3240.
3240?
I'm over here.
Would you like to talk to Mr. King right now?
Sarah, you were part of the process, I think, when we first created the position. I've actually talked with Tina over the years at different times about ideas that I've had about tweaking the position. But basically, my hands have been tied because the way that it's set up is board policy. So we pretty much are pretty strict in terms of how we go about that process. There is the students submit a petition, just like traditional board members do. I typically do that during the May and into June, and we have an election in June at the end of the school year. Again, just like any traditional board member, there's an election process, and then the student is appointed as an ex officio member of the board. That's the way the policy is written, and that's the way we do it. To change it would mean to change the policy, and we'd have to really redesign the way the position is done, and that would have to be, and that would be your decision. The challenge that we face, and I feel bad Grace isn't even here to sort of defend herself, I will tell you that the kids that we have doing this are phenomenal kids every year. The problem is that those kids are in everything. One of the best things about Trumansburg is that you can be a kid who's in multiple sports and the musical and in student government and be the student board member. And that's been the case every year that I've been here. We've had kids that are truly involved in everything. So when it's the 3 months of musical season and they have rehearsals every night from 5 to 7 or 5 to 8, kids aren't going to be here. And when they have a away track meet on Mondays and Fridays during the months of April, May, and June, they're not going to be here. So especially when the commitment is also that a lot of these kids are also taking multiple AP exams, or they're in divisions, or they're in all sorts of activities. The commitment of coming and sitting in a board meeting for 3 hours to give a 2-minute report, and very often they're very intimidated. So in terms of actually getting involved in the budget conversation, because I've talked to the kids who are on the, who are our board rep, and they have opinions, but I think they're very intimidated by the process. So, I mean, there's obstacles. If we wanted to talk about doing it differently, I have suggestions, because I know there's other districts that do it differently, but I don't want to.
Well, from a policy perspective,
Yeah.
yes, suggestions are always welcome. And one of the things that I found to be interesting, I had a conversation with Chris Mall a while ago, and he said that initially the idea was to have 2. It goes by semester. So that actually lessens the commitment to one individual student, and it also gives 2 students an opportunity if that's what they wanted to do. So, and I also think, I won't speak for Gary, but in terms of where they fall in the agenda, that's a simple fix. And just move them up front.
Yeah.
So in other districts, I know my previous district, they had 2 high schools, so they had 2 reps, one from each building, and it was usually the president of the student council. And the 2 kids would share, they would both come, and at one of the very first things on the board agenda was to share an update from the schools and from the student perspective on the things that are going around, what's going on at the district level, what's going on at the high schools, student activities, et cetera, et cetera. And then they skedaddled. But it was 2 kids, so that if one kid couldn't be there, they shared their stuff with the other kid, and there was always that banter. But they were not the formal ex officio member. They were simply student representatives that came in and came to the meeting. So they weren't sitting at the table as a member of the board. They were just student members who, like you have an opportunity for the TTA and the support staff units to share. It was the same kind of thing. It was just a standard part of the agenda, 5 minutes of updates from the kids about what's going on at the school.
Is that something your student council would be, maybe they should get their input as well?
My number one concern would be having multiple kids. Yeah, having multiple kids that could do it. If it was, president and vice president of student council, or, even just, students who signed up to do it in some capacity. The selection process and the campaign, a lot of the kids are just intimidated by, like, I have to get a petition, I have to, there have been years when we've had 2 or 3 kids run. There have been a lot of years when we've only had 1 student run.
That's our policy. That's not state educational law.
Right.
So that is, that can be changed here.
Right. But again, having 2 kids or even 3 students who are in that role and know that their job is to do a report, share what's going on, come to the meeting for the first few minutes. That way, if one of them's in the musical this time of the year, they're going to miss it. That's okay. One of them's on the baseball team. Okay, you're going to miss a couple meetings. But there's enough overlap that we would have more consistency of having some kids coming to share. Because I think it is important to hear what's going on in the schools.
Well, the other thing that we were kind of curious about is how is the information, assuming that they take information from our board meetings, how is that then disseminated back to their classmates? Is there a vehicle by which it's done, or is it just, sitting around the lunch table and saying, oh, by the way?
I don't know that there's any formal mechanism that the students would be taking stuff.
So we could have a choice of basically saying we want this to be somewhat professional and formal, or we could say, we could change the policy to simply say, we'd simply like to have as many students involved as would like to be, so it's an open house and welcome, but you don't have any official position. So I would like to, personally would like to have some of that feedback from the student council or other students, because that should be what they want. So what, we should provide them what it is that they want.
What James said.
What James said.
I can bring that back to the student council and ask
Yeah.
our student council reps to talk to some kids and see if it's something that they'd be
Well, this
interested in.
echoes, I think, the way initially it came about, is the fact that there was some movement among students saying, we'd like to have a little representation, and, how do we go about doing that? And Douglas and I looked up the state or the education law, and it's very specific if you've got multiple high schools in one district, but we fall into that little category that it's really rather simple. So, and again, as I said, that it's easy for us locally to change our policy. I would say that we had spoken about it at the last policy committee, and we're more than willing to do that.
What if we invite the student council to the next board meeting and have a similar discussion as right now, except at the beginning of the meeting? Whoever can come to the meeting, we can, instead of you being the middleman, which is fine also, but just.
I would be glad to talk to the student council advisors and have them, they meet with the kids at least once a week, to just invite a group of kids to come and talk about how we can do that.
I think the whole goal is to have a student voice
Yeah.
at these meetings, and if we only have one student, and then we offer that one opportunity for that one student, we don't get that voice. We don't hear that, we hear it from you or the other principals, but I think that's by allowing the student to, by allowing our structure to fit into a student's life, may better allow for that voice to be heard and to be regular. So I think multiple would be great, and I think it'd be great to hear what they think about the idea as well.
Yeah.
And perhaps less formality, because I would think that the interest would ebb and flow.
Yeah.
That there would be some groups, some classes that would be very interested because they're of a political nature, and others just didn't have the time. So your participation is going to go like this, and if we leave it, less formal aspect, then it makes it available for almost any student that wanted to say something, particularly if they know that we would encourage them.
Yeah.
Might not agree with them, but we'll certainly listen to them. Okay, well, if you would be willing to talk to
I will facilitate that conversation and see if I can get some student council kids to come to the next board meeting.
Great.
Thank you.
Anyone else in terms of questions, comments, board forum? I would just echo the sentiments that have been expressed by members of the audience. I think that as we move forward with our budgets in the future and the question of really providing universal pre-K, that we do have to give some consideration as to whether we're going to upfront that cost and hopefully prevent those problems that are going to be more costly academically down the road if we don't do that. So I know that we're late in that discussion. Obviously, that train has left the station for this year, but as we look forward to next year, I think that's a question that the board really needs to take under consideration. So, anyone else? Move to adjourn to executive session for matters relating to the appointment, discipline, dismissal of particular persons or persons. Okay. We will not be returning to conduct any business. We'll adjourn out of executive session. Thank you very much.